Earlier this week, we saw our entertainment reporter sit down with Casey Affleck, Ben's younger brother, about his latest movie.
Well, it hit theaters today, and we get Jim Ferguson's rating on it and hear from two more of the stars. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning. Our Hollywood happening today looks at The Finest Hours, a true story that took place in February of 1952 when one of the worst storms to ever hit the East Coast struck Cape Cod, damaging an oil tanker. Well, on a small lifeboat faced with frigid temperatures and 70-foot waves, 4 members of the Coast Guard, led by Bernie Weber, played by Chris Pine, and Richard Livesley, played by Ben Foster, set out to rescue more than 30 stranded sailors. Set in 1952, Cape Cod. Am I wrong about this, but the records for weather, is that still considered the worst blizzard of that period or that place?
Not sure specifically, but it was one of the worst nor'easters, I think, of the century of that time, as far as I know. Yeah.
You know, as actors, it must feel good to be able to play characters involved in a story about real heroes and life and sacrifices.
It's the greatest privilege we have. So many films, you can have a guy with a cape, and that's a symbol of a hero. These men and women in the Coast Guard save lives every day, and to spend time with them in preparation, the real Coast Guard, is such a privilege for us make-believers.
That's the word I was looking for, Ben. Privilege. It's a privilege as actors. You know, your characters, Richard and of course Bernie Weber, they were serving in the Coast Guard at that time, 1952. Wow, when I look at the uniforms with the patch and everything, it's really changed today, hasn't it?
It has indeed. I mean, let's just look at the boat itself. It's a wooden boat with a compass strapped onto a piece of wood right next to in the cockpit. We went on the $1.5 million steel behemoths that they have today that are pretty badass and awesome, and not to say what they're doing today is any less heroic than what was happening back then, but to think about 70-foot waves with a wooden boat without a compass, zero visibility, wind and sleet and snow, and that these men actually saved 32 lives that night. Incredible. And if you then do the math of that, those 32 lives went on to make families, and those families multiplied. So what those 4 people did that night have had an effect on thousands, probably, of people, which I find is incredible.
I never thought of it that way.
Listen up! Put the sea behind us. Just let it push us along till we lay up somewhere. The storm's easing up, boys, so we just look for the lights on the shore to guide us in. Even if we have to go so far as Knobscook Point, so be it. We just gotta find land. One heck of a long day, right, fellas? Yeah, sure has. But don't you give up hope on me now. She's a good boat. She'll get us through. We'll get you home, okay? We're all going home.
And it's understandable why new recruits into the Coast Guard, they must learn about Bernie Weber and the men that were involved in this rescue. It's required. And he's still considered today one of the greatest
small boat rescues of all time.
Yeah.
And I think more should be said about the Coast Guard. You know, there's much to be said about all the armed forces, obviously, but if you look at what these men and women do, is they patrol the waters right off our coast, off our coast. Sometimes they're sent far away into battle as units working with the military abroad, but what they do every day with anything from sailors and fishermen to surfers, to swimmers, to raiding boats, the anti-terrorism, they have a job now that is far more complicated and dangerous than what we as make-believers do every day.
I want you to go up on deck and have a look. got maybe 3 hours, and then we set.
I'm not giving up on him. The compass is gone!
Well, Disney's The Finest Hours is a heroic thriller based on a true story of the most daring rescue mission in the history of the U.S. Coast Guard. The special effects are on an epic scale. Director Craig Gillespie captures the period and takes us to the heart of the action. Also, it's a wonderful 3D experience. It's rated PG-13. My grade, a solid B. I'm going to see you next Tuesday right here on The Morning Blend.